short of it. I am your host, Jennifer Wren, and I could not be happier to be here with you tonight. It is a beautiful Thursday. I'm here in California. A lot of the smoke is cleared. We're hoping it stays clear. The sky is sort of beginning to come out in beautiful Southern California. And, before I talk about the weather any longer, I'm actually going to bring on my incredible co-host, the funny, the kind, as I like to say, the evergreen, Beth Hickey, Advanced Sommelier. How are you doing tonight, Beth?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so excited about this thrilling label that we have behind you tonight, because we're gonna get into it. But the labels are like no other, and I can't say any more than that. But I've been trying this week. There's been a lot going on. I feel like we say this every week, but I know it's 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in my industry keeps making the joke, get a mini, it's 2020. So I've been looking for some good news. And my good news this week is that I read online that the honeybee population in the United States is recovering at unbelievable rates. In some states, they're reporting as much as 70% of honeybees are coming back online. And there was a lot of concern around hive collapse for a long time, and they didn't really know why that was happening. So I think I was going to say for you, I'm going to actually adjust my light here and be a little crazy because I can't see myself. There we go. That's a little bit better. No, I'm blown out. Beth, when we talk about honeybees in relation to the wine industry, I mean, they are pollinators. How much of an effect, to your knowledge, does that have?
That's actually a really great question. And I will be honest and say, I don't know. Perhaps our guest later on will know. But I don't know how it relates to the wine industry. I'm curious. I actually haven't thought about that. I'm embarrassed to say.
It's kind of an out of left field question that I totally just sprung on you. But
you did, yeah.
Sorry, it's something that I was considering tonight because when you think about honeybees, they affect every portion of our food chain, and it's something that's really important. So, thank God they're back in business, right?
Well, especially for the tree fruits and everything that we love to eat. I forget the percentage of what we consume, at the dinner table actually is attributed to bees. So, and it was like, what, 60% or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And to just think that wouldn't be, like, we would have to find other means to make this happen. And I've heard that they're using drones, to basically sprinkle the pollen to try to mimic that. So it's wonderful news that.
I actually heard in Asia that people were literally taking paintbrushes and painting and pollinating flowers with little teeny paintbrushes, which makes me think of painting the roses red. It's a little meta right there. But let me ask you a question, Beth, because you are I'm down here in Los Angeles. You're up there in Seattle. One of the big news stories this year that came out was the invasion of Asian murder hornets.
Yeah, we have those. Because
how's that going?
2020 bingo card, I had murder hornets, so I was really excited.
Has there been any updates since we initially heard about them, or are they just waiting in the wings? That was
no, literally. I loosely follow, because I do listen to my local NPR station, KOW, quite a bit. And I feel like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, they had mentioned that they found a possible queen. And then I never heard a follow-up story about it. And I will admit, being a mother of 3, navigating 2020, like I didn't follow up on it. But I believe there have been, I can say that I've heard at least 2 stories of the murder hornets, or maybe 3, where they were all, like, I think one had already passed, and I think the other 2 may have been assisted in their move to the afterlife by whomever found them.
Their transition to the other side, to that hive in the sky. No, I'm just so curious because it was something that kind of like there was a big story and it kind of went away. I was laughing though because when you were like they found the queen, and as a mother of 3, I thought you'd be like I can relate to how she feels.
Well, we won't go there.
Right. Well, without ado, that was not even the word I was looking for. I really want to bring on our guest for the evening because we need to talk about something really important. And for those of you who are not familiar with the long and the short of it, I am Jennifer Wren. I am the short shot of whiskey. I happen to be 5'2". And of course, Beth is our long pour of incredible wine. She is an advanced som. Beth, how tall are you actually? I think I've asked you this before.
I'm 6 foot.
6 foot. Gosh, what I would give for 6 feet. Man, the world must be very beautiful from up there because all I see is knees. But I'm going to go ahead and bring on our guest tonight. He is a talented opera singer, former and recently current. He has worked in the hospitality industry, in restaurants. He is, like Beth, an advanced sommelier. We are so pleased to welcome Eli Traverse to the long and short of it. Welcome, Eli.
Ooh, hi. How's it going?
Hi. It's good. It's good. How are you doing?
I'm so good. Although now I'm just thinking about murder hornets. So.
Well, I'll make you laugh. So, one of the first times I ever saw a Scottish bumblebee, I was terrified because a lot of people don't realize this, but up in the Scottish Highlands, Scottish bumblebees are about the size of your hand, and they're perfectly harmless and they just bumble around, but they're truly prehistoric. And when they land on something, it bends with their weight. So I had never seen one before, but they have fuzzy fat bee butts, which are adorable, but they're in mega size. So it's really scary. But Eli, I do want to steer the conversation. You know, this was originally conceived to be a lighthearted show, and we do keep it pretty light here at the long and the short of it. We're drinking whiskey and wine, you know, why not? But, you know, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about something that was very close to your heart tonight. And I think this is a very important topic because not only do you and I have a lot in common in our background, but it's something that has become a very immediate concern for us in the year of COVID. So let's talk about this, Eli. What was your mission tonight?
Well, a big part of it is, so full disclosure, I'm married to an opera singer. My wife, Shelly, is still a current opera singer. We met in school, in college, studying voice together. And I sort of veered into the hospitality industry and then eventually the wine industry, but she's still pursuing performing and doing a lot of it, or had been doing a lot of it with Seattle Opera here in Seattle. So, but honestly, you know, obviously 2020 has thrown everything at us that we never could have expected. And it's been particularly hard I think for both of our industries, for hospitality and for performance and art. You know, for her experience, there was the initial, I think, you know, the tragedy of just cancellations, right? Of having work lined up or having these opportunities to share your art and talent with the world, and then not being able to do that. But then there was also almost like a deeper personal trouble with it, knowing that it could be a long time before people feel really comfortable, you know, crowding into a big theater to go see live performance. You know, it's also hard when the super spreaders of the world right now are singers and people who have to rely on projecting a lot of sound and a lot of air into the world. So I think it's you know, it's been really hard, and we both kind of grieved the process too, just because knowing that it'll be more than a year. I mean, the Met Opera Company just announced they're canceling the rest of their season. That'll probably shortly follow with other companies and other theaters. And it's just heartbreaking. You know, it's really hard. So I think, you know, and obviously people in the wine industry, restaurant industry are feeling it also. But it's been tough to find a lot of the hope in it, I think, just because it's especially when you're a singer, I think so much of your instrument and your art is actually your body, and it's actually part of you. And it's not something you can just put down. It's not something you can send it to someone to fix it when it's broke. It's really a part of your being. And so I think it affects singers even more so, where it's not just, you know, not being able to work. It's all of a sudden not being able to use your instrument. It's for what it was meant to do.
Oh, yes, I could not agree more. Not agree more. And I think the reason this hit home today is it seems like the word of the day, at least in my universe over here, is intersectionality. And I was speaking to an incredible performer and a spirits industry professional, Joanna Carpenter, earlier today. And, you know, she's in that position of, she's a absolutely fantastic, you know, bartender and spirits professional, but her dream and her passion is Broadway. And, there was always that thing. I used to do musical theater. I lived in New York, so I lived a life very similar to her. And there was always this idea that, if you can't get the gig, right? So you're trying to get the gig, you're going to auditions. The fallback tends to be hospitality, with a huge emphasis in spirits. And, some people know this that have known me for a long time, but, I got my leg or my foot into the industry because a fellow actress referred me for a job working as a spokesperson for the Moet Hennessy catalog. And that job led me to single malt, and that job kept food on my table for 8 years. So, I said to my husband when all this stuff went down, I said, if this was New York City, and he works in production, he's now an executive producer. And I said, and all the productions were shut down and musical theater was shut down. And then my gig, doing, spirits was shut down. I was like, we would be devastated. I mean, our whole household would be devastated. And I think there is this true, not only people share a passion for the arts and share a passion for spirits and hospitality, but I do find that people who have, one leg in both worlds also excel at both. They take both so seriously and personally. And I think that really speaks to what you were talking about that personal loss. It's not just income. It's a losing of one's identity. So, and Beth, I'm going to actually take it over to you for a second. And Eli, I'm sure you have an opinion about this as well. We're getting heavy tonight, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with getting a little heavy. One of the hard things that happened, I mentioned the fires at the very beginning, in referral to the smoke that's happening right now. But we had a pretty devastating last week in Napa, and it is going to have ripple effects for the wine industry for a pretty significant amount of time. Can either of you guys speak to that?
Well, and it's not over. I mean, the percentage of containment is pretty low last I heard. It's devastating to lose Meadowwood, to lose iconic wineries, just to have people lose their homes. And it's been not quite every year, but I mean, it's been fairly nonstop. So my heart goes out to everyone impacted right now. It's devastating. And who knows what the news will be tomorrow. So hoping that, just rain.
Yes. And what about Eli? Has this affected your day-to-day with the wines that you work with?
So a little bit, but almost more just because of the way that people are feeling in general. I think, I work for Avennia winery here in Washington. We're a self-distributed winery, so I don't have a big portfolio. It's just sort of our brands. And so there is the aspect of local relationships, but every single one of my buyers and every single account is also buying wine from Napa and Sonoma, and they know they have close relationships with a lot of those wineries. So it's devastating overall. I mean, it's the kind of industry where you can't isolate one incident and have it affect just that one part, like sector of the industry. It's the same with, the tariff threat earlier in the year, like was all about European wines and European goods. And people would say, oh, you work for a Washington winery, it probably doesn't affect you, but it affects my buyers. It affects everyone who's trying to plan out their year and figuring out what they can spend money on and how they can create wonderful programs for their shelves and for their lists. And so it really does, it's devastating. It's really hard.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's been a hard week. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. There was another aspect that I thought about, guys, and I'd be curious what your thoughts were. When I was a young girl, I'm still a young girl, but when I was a young girl, going to the theater in my household was a thing. Like, it was a thing. So, my mom knew that I loved musical theater as a child, and, we would get dressed up. We'd go downtown Atlanta. We'd typically have a meal at one of the fancier restaurants, like the peasant, restaurants that were huge in the 80s. And then we would go to the theater and have an evening. So it wasn't just that theatrical people or performers were working in the hospitality industry. It was that whole evening of culture, of drink and food and art was sort of like a chain of events that people would partake in. And it was that idea of like from soup to nuts, engaging in the sensual pleasure of fine dining and hospitality, and then fine music and fine performers. And I yearn for that. I mean, there's a part of me that truly misses that. I mean, the years that I lived in New York City and I go to see shows or go to see the opera or ballet, it was always like, let's meet for some kind of big fancy meal beforehand. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance and ritual around it. How do you see those things coming back? Do we think that the opera, the theater, the ballet is going to begin to embrace the same kind of at-home raised service we're seeing from fine dining at this point? What does the future look like for you guys?
I mean, I think it already is. It's already happening. And, even just thinking here in Seattle, Seattle Opera has done. They did a whole summer recital series where they still employed singers. They paid singers to record like a half an hour recital, and sort of tailor those songs, those recitals to what's happening in the world and sort of how they're viewing everything. And that was, I thought, an incredible way to reach people at home. There's also, the Seattle Chamber Music Society. That's not their actual name, but it's a super long running chamber music group here in Seattle, is also doing sort of where you can pay a small subscription and then get access to a lot of performances throughout like every week. I mean, we are starting to see more groups do that, and more plays that are still creating content. So
yeah, I mean, just everything he said, that, and also like the Seattle Symphony, you can subscribe and have the concerts at home. And I think that, restaurants are doing chef's kits. You can get cocktail kits, so you can elevate the home experience. And I see that definitely probably gaining momentum as we go into the gray season in Seattle, which lasts 9 months, which I love. But I mean, it does make you feel like you want to, kind of get cozy at home and enjoy the richer foods. And Seattle, I mean, we love our cinema, we love art, and we support it. So I feel like that will continue on through our gray season. And hopefully, our new normal will wait for us in 2021. And we'll be able to go back out as they are. I believe in Europe, they've opened up some venues, I mean, socially distanced, but I mean, anyone that's ahead of us, we can see what our future might look like. So hopefully.
Yeah, I think Shakespeare in the Park never looked so good at this point. It's like as much park as possible. I have to apologize for those who have been watching the show for a little while. This is our 3rd episode. I forgot something very important tonight. Beth mentioned the fine weather that is moving into Seattle, that fine, chilly weather. And you are wearing one of your fantastic parade of outfits, Ms. Hickey. Can you please tell us what you are wearing this evening?
Well, my sartorial choice tonight is vintage de Saint Laurent, to pair with the Seductive Slander and the Dalmore 18. So
this is fantastic.
And I knew that Eli would be bringing some classical music. So I thought I'd wear something that I would wear out to an evening of culture and the fun things in life.
Well, I had it very much similarly in mind. I decided to put on a dress tonight to attend the opera. So it's kind of funny. We're almost fulfilling our own prophecy that tonight we are creating this fine experience and a little bit of a trip to the opera later. So I guess in that case, I think it's about time to start our tasting. Yeah, right. I mean, I'm getting a little thirsty for some whiskey. We are sipping on the wine, but whiskey time. So if you've been watching, this is our 3rd episode. And as we're moving from episode to episode, we are doing currently a vertical tasting of the Dalmore single malt range. So this means first episode was 12, 2nd episode was 15, and now we have moved to the glorious Woman in Blue, the 18. This is an absolutely outstanding single malt. I am thrilled to share it with you guys tonight. So there's been some recent talk in the whiskey industry that you should never compare whiskey to a woman. I'm going to break that rule tonight. So if I get canceled, Beth, you get to host it next week.
All right.
So no, the reason that I refer to this whiskey as a woman is I make the joke a lot. The Dalmore 12, which is the very beginning point of what we call our principal collection. This is a whiskey that has spent 9 years of its life in ex-bourbon, and then it's moved 50% of it into Methuselah Oloroso sherry casks that are a minimum of 30 years old. So you guys have heard me say this a couple of times. The differentiator for the Dalmore is we have access to these exclusive 30-year-old Methuselah Oloroso casks. Now, when we talk about our 12-year-old, what does that mean? Well, it means we get this house style that is instantly recognizable with the Dalmore, that is luscious, it's rich, it's friendly, it's viscous, it coats the tongue, and it has this very, very apparent quality of chocolate orange. So why would I refer to this as a woman? Well, I like to refer to the Dalmore 12 and the Dalmore 18 as the little sister and the older sister. And the reason for that is they have a very similar DNA. They are very clearly related. But the difference is the older sister has a couple more years on her. She's been to the big city. She's learned some tough lessons, and she's come back better than ever, right? Now, what does that mean exactly? So if you think about the Dalmore 12 as a 9-3, 9 years, and then 3 years, 50% Methuselah finishing, right? You're going to look at the Dalmore 18, and this is a 14-4. So first of all, the whiskey is going to spend the first 14 years of its life in those ex-bourbon American oak barrels, sucking up all those delicious vanillins and all those, or vanillins, sorry, I'm an American, and a little bit of that tannin that comes from those big, oak cellular structures, and it's going to soften and it's going to age. But here's the difference. The longer that we put whiskey in a cask, the more obvious the wood influence is. The shorter we put whiskey in a cask, the more obvious that the liquid influence is. So if translates loosely, it means that our 12-year-old is going to have a little bit more influence of the bourbon that was in the cask. Our 14-year-old is going to have a little bit more influence of those ex-bourbon American barrels. So she's already coming out at 14 years with a little bit more of a drying quality and a little bit more of a structured quality. So unlike her little sister, the 12, 100% of this liquid is then going to be transferred into those 30-year-old Methuselah Oloroso barrels from our fantastic bodega in Jerez, González Vías. So what does that mean? Well, it means instead of having a 50-50 portion like the 12 that we bring back together, every single drop of this liquid has had some contact with that Oloroso sherry barrel. It's going to have all the qualities of the Oloroso sherry. Now, when you put all of these aspects together and you bring them into the Dalmore 18, you get something very different than the little sister. Where the little sister is round, the older sister is dry. Where the little sister has that orange sweetness, the older sister is going to have a little bit more of a sea mist, a maritime quality, kind of evoking where our distillery sits. So we're going to get a little bit of this maritime quality, but we're also going to get a dustiness and a mustiness. Now, I know that doesn't sound totally appetizing, like no one wants to lick a dusty broom. But when I say dusty and mustiness, I mean on this particular whiskey, you can actually taste an age. You feel the presence of those 18 years. You feel the presence of that additional wood influence. And when you bring it to your nose, and I do welcome you guys to do this, if you have a copita, right instantly, you are going to get a little bit of almost like a lemon zest, but you're also going to get that orange, but the orange is dried orange. It's orange pith and peel. It is no longer obvious chocolate orange. Now, when I refer people to this whiskey, I typically say, if you are someone who enjoys single malts, you're looking for something with a little bit more structure, a little less roundness and viscosity than our 12-year-old, this is a perfect whiskey to pair with things like red meat or a hearty red sauce. It's going to really keep its elbows. It's going to still show up against all that fatty meat. So the biggest single challenge of this show is that, and I've said this before, I have always wanted to pair single malt with wine. And that is not an easy game. And we are 2 for 2. So the older sister who's been to the city but came back to Inverness to tell her tale, what have you paired with this beautiful Dalmore 18? Beth Hickey.
Oh, and I do love the Dalmore 18. So I went with Orin Swift's Slander.
Ah,
It is a richer expression of Pinot Noir. You're getting like black cherry, dark cherry. The grapes are coming from Sonoma Coast, Santa Rita Hills, and Rush River Valley. So you have kind of basically the best vineyards that he has access to, and he has access to some pretty amazing vineyards. So basically, we're looking at it's aged for 10 months in French oak, 30% new. So you are getting the sweet baking spices. He does let the grapes hang just a little bit longer to get that ripeness. It's just really rich and silky. There's a dark cherry, like dark red, almost black cherry that I get in the wine. And I get a little bit hints of like dark red fruit in that Dalmore 18, just these ephemeral little hints with the sweet baking spices. That's my bridge. So I was going for like that rich decadent in the Dalmore 18. I was going for the rich decadent in the Slander. They're both, I think, very beautiful, silky expressions in the portfolios. So that's where I went. So I'll just briefly talk about Dave Finney, the winemaker for Orin Swift. In 1998, he launched Orin Swift, and then in 2000, he launched The Prisoner, which iconic wine. He sold The Prisoner in 2010 and 2006, and he kept the Orin Swift wines. In 2016, he partnered up with Gallo, whom I work for. And then, so he's in my portfolio. He's actually my age, so I think it's fascinating. So we share the same cultural references. So I look at that abstract bottle, the label, and it's like, I can see like there's Queen Elizabeth, there's Tilda Swinton, there's just like over 200 images on this. So just a very unique man who makes very unique wines that are distinctly his. You can tell a Dave Finney wine, and this is his Pinot Noir. Now the label,
it's amazing.
he does. I mean, it's part of the package with Dave. So he grew up in Southern California, and just kind of that visual. With this particular bottling, as the story was told to me, is that he just was bottling the Pinot Noir and at the office, so to speak, and he just like slapped on some, like it's duct tape. And he's like, that looks amazing. And it stayed. That is, I mean, you can actually, if you pick up the bottle, it has the feel of duct tape. It works. It suits his oeuvre, his work. There's an authenticity to it, and what he does, and people love it. He has a huge following. So, but yeah, that's my rather long explanation of the wine and the label itself. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, well, I mean, and I have to reflect back at you with the pairing of that dark fruit. That on our end, that's coming from the additional exposure to the Methuselah Oloroso.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting the richness of the sherry. I absolutely get it in the wine. I mean, hands down, this feels very decadent. And I love this pairing because we're moving into fall. So we're starting to get into that season where, as you were saying, it's actually, I think your colleague Kyle the other day said it's sweater weather in Seattle. It's that denser, heavier, I'm looking for a sweater, I'm looking for a leather jacket. And I feel like this really plays into the season. The other thing that I'm noticing, and God, guys, I cannot encourage you out there more in virtual land. If you can get these pairings, I mean, it is mind blowing what Beth has done. One of the things that she's managed to do here is, I think I said earlier that the Dalmore 12 is very viscous. So it really, really coats the tongue, almost like caramel. It just fills the mouth. The Dalmore 18 actually has a mid-palate finish. It really stops right where the salivary glands are. When I say things like that, I'm like, is anybody as big of a nerd as I am? But yes, right here where the salivary glands are, right where if you're singing, you want to have that that reverse trumpet for those singers out there. But what happens with the Slander, it's doing the exact same thing. It's hitting right in that mid palate, and it's causing all that juice to really flow. and it's just exceptional. And the other thing, Beth, we've talked about a couple times is the concern. Obviously, all of these single malts are going to knock the wines out when it comes to ABV. They're going to be aggressively hot compared to the wines. So this is a 43% AV. Sorry, guys, been a long day. ABV whiskey. There we go. So I'm sure that you had a little bit of concern with the heat of this, but I mean, balancing wise, it's just a perfect twin. I mean, it's just right there, So I'm curious, for your side with the whiskey, like, have you noticed? What was besides the stone fruit? Was there any other key indicator that you were like, this is the one?
It's for me, the Dalmore 18 has that. I love that we're actually tasting it now as we move into fall, because there's that rich decadence and there's the sweet baking spices, and that 30-year Methuselah sherry sings through, and the richness in this. There's a little bit of like demerara sugar, like dark sugar that I get, and I get a little bit of hints of that in the wine, but it's more of like a caramel, so like a different version of it per se. So I was just thinking like dark, rich, decadent, silky. I'll say seductive. I mean, these are beautiful spirits. They're very just very silky on the palate. So that was my bridge. Like that was one of the first pairings that I was like, okay, that's those two are going together. This was one of my easier pairings, I would say.
I mean, I'm blown away. Episode 3, yet again, you've caused me to be blown away. So I do have to say the thing I always say every episode, which is that the people on this live cast are 21 years old, at legal drinking age. We are at home. We are not driving. So I do encourage anybody out there, if you are sipping along with us, whether you're enjoying the Orin Swift Slander or the Dalmore 18, please do imbibe responsibly, because we are imbibing responsibly. But here's the thing. This pairing, it cannot be complete, because we are not a duet. We are a trio tonight. Mm-hmm. So Eli, the big thing about the long and the short of it is that our third pairing is always something completely surprising and out of the box. And although you are an advanced sommelier, that is not what we're focusing on tonight. So would you like to tell us what you have paired with us tonight?
Oh boy, yeah. So by the way, I just love hearing both of you talk about these beverages, because they're amazing and beautiful. And it's funny because I picked a piece to pair with these, not really knowing how great it was actually going to pair. And hearing you all talk about what you just talked about, it works perfectly. So, I mean, that's actually setting the bar pretty high. But anyway,
let's go with it.
One of the things, so this weekend, my wife and I were up celebrating her birthday. We were up near Mount Baker. We were in the cabin where there was a fireplace. We decided, hey, let's try this wine. Let's try this whiskey and sort of talk about it, experience it. And you're absolutely right that the thing that stuck out the most was the richness, the silkiness, that texture presence, the warmth. And it does have some high tones, whether that's the citrus peel, whether it's there is still a sort of a nuttiness coming from the Oloroso sherry barrels. We thought of peanut brittle actually as a sort of this combo between nutty and caramel, which every aspect of the whiskey was just that really comforting, warm richness, silky. And then the Orin Swift, the Slander, bridged the same kind of richness, that same luscious mouthfeel. For a Pinot Noir, it's got good alcohol. I mean, this is a larger than life Pinot Noir. So I would call it maybe the operatic version of a Pinot Noir. So, but like in what Beth said, there's those dark fruits. It is very sensuous. It's sensual. There's a romantic element to it. So we decided that I bet if you polled a lot of classical music fans, a lot of opera singers, and asked them, what would be one of the most romantic, rich, and silky pieces out there, they would probably tell you Richard Strauss's Der Rosenkavalier. So A little bit. It's funny because I'm so excited to talk about this piece and about how how it blends in. So cut me off whenever you need to actually like move on with the conversation. So, oh, I think you're muted. Well, but that's big.
I said, Eli, we are doing fine on time. You take your time.
So, so a little background. So the piece that I've actually paired with this is the very end of the opera. It's near the end. It's the final trio of the three main characters in the opera. It's famous in the opera world for being just one of the most romantic, luscious, rich, harmonically, like big climax moments of any opera. And it's just gorgeous. And this, there's a lot of elements of just the music that I think pair well with the beverages, and just that there's, you know, there's this long, slow build. The piece is, it's a longer piece. It's about 4.5 minutes long. And it starts out very, very soft, very contemplative, and there's a lot of emotion. But then as the piece builds, in the same way that, you know, when you have this glass of Pinot, all those aromas, the flavors in on your palate start building and building. There's such a beautiful finish. And same with the whiskey, that there is kind of this constant, you know, this build and crescendo into this huge climax. It's the kind of piece, you know, when we talked about these beverages and then thinking about moving into the fall season and it's getting colder, and like all you want to do is sit by a fire and just cuddle in and have this wine, have this whiskey, and listen into this piece. So a little background on the piece, just because obviously this is by Richard Strauss, so it's in German. So you won't really understand the lyrics unless you're fluent in German, which I am not, but some of you may be. Well, I was going to say, Beth, yeah, you speak.
I took a year and a half in college. Yeah.
Nice. But so a little basically about the plot. So this is a trio between the Marschallin, who is the sort of the main character, and she is a wealthy, very powerful woman, and this takes place in Vienna in like basically the end of the Habsburg Empire, so mid 18th century. Vienna this is all about refinement and the height of culture, art. This is, you know, this was Vienna in the 18th century was where everything was happening. There was a lot of jewelry and like fancy balls. This is where the waltz, or all of Strauss's waltzes, were sort of modeled after this Viennese culture. So it takes place there. And the Marschallin is this powerful woman. She's married to the field marshal, which is why she's the Marschallin. But it was an arranged marriage. She's not really super in love with him. So she's had flings here and there. And the opera opens actually with her and this young Count Octavian, who's 17 years old. And they've just spent a morning in bed. So I'll let your mind wander a little bit, but right away, this opera is all about romance and this central. It's technically a comic opera, and it does get funny later on with some other characters. But at the heart of it is just this romance, but also this sense of aging. And it's really interesting hearing you talk about the 18-year Dalmor, and it's the notes of aging and how that's such a big part of it. And honestly, I think one of the biggest themes in the opera is the way that the Marschallin deals with her own aging. And a lot of the way she deals with the relationships with other characters is the fact, you know, she's in her early to mid 30s. Count Octavian is a 17-year-old, very go-getter young man, which, by the way, is played by a woman. So this is technically a trouser role or a pants role, which is common in opera, where you have a mezzo-soprano or a soprano play a male character. Part of that, I think, was actually Strauss loved writing for female voices. He was married to a soprano, and all of his operas feature soprano and women, high women's voices. So you have this young 17-year-old man, and then this about 18-year older woman who are in love with each other. And thinking about the Orin Swift, which is, I think the 2017 is the vintage too. So there's the 17-year-old thing there. Mm-hmm. Opera starts, they're in love, but the Marschallin realizes that, you know, I'm too old for this kid. This is really great, but I know eventually I might have to let him go, and that he'll find someone else to fall in love with. And that'll be hard for me, but I need to battle and wrestle with this idea of time and aging, and realize that I don't know if I'll be able to find that. I'm already married, that I'll need to let this go, and that might be hard. Fast forward through 3 acts of comic opera things where you have the big ox baron, and he's coming in and he's betrothed to this beautiful young Sophie who he's trying to set up this proposal ceremony by having a Rosenkavalier, or a Knight of the Rose, deliver a silver rose to her as part of this ancient Viennese tradition, which is not a real tradition. The librettist just made it up. But he picks Octavian, the young count, to be this Rosenkavalier. And so he presents this silver rose in another beautiful scene from the opera in Act 2 to Sophie, and they instantly fall in love because it's opera. Everyone just instantly falls in love. And then the Baron comes in, he's mad. Octavian's like, oh, I want to be with her. We'll figure it out. I'll challenge you to a duel. All this chaos happens. They decide we're going to trick the Baron because he's just kind of this fool, which he's not really a fool, but it's a comic opera. They figure out a way to trick him, to lie, to slander. Maybe.
Nice tie-in.
Yeah.
I see what you did there.
And it gets to the point where by the end of Act 3, the Marshland, who's this whole time is this powerful, which is almost think of like a politician, someone who's really persuasive, really who knows her stuff, who can really insist her will on people and make things happen. And by the end of the opera, Octavian and Sophie are in love. Octavian is still conflicted though, because he has feelings for the Marshland. But the Marshland has already decided that she wants to let him go. That this is the time where she realizes that him and Sophie, who are both young, I think Sophie is 15 or 16 in the actual story. And so this is the moment where she recognizes her age. She's a very dignified woman, very refined, and she decides, I love you, but I will let you go. And they sing this trio, which again will just lead us into this super emotional, rich, dense, beautiful, beautiful singing. But also it's sort of a mark for the Marshland to realize that, you can appreciate things when they're happening in the moment, but that sometimes you do have to let those things go and let those moments go. So.
I love this. I sort of have three responses. The sum total of my German is the libretto of Cabaret. Number two, please bear with me. I am going to be pulling up a video in real time. And then number three, I'm going to invite you all. I'm actually going to pour myself another slanderous wine, and to enjoy this with. But we're going to do something that I don't think a lot of people do these days in media. We are going to play the full trio of this, and we're just going to enjoy it and allow you as our audience to enjoy it and to really soak up this beautiful writing, this beautiful music. And I really hope it fills your soul with that same sort of silky, welcoming, indulgent, rich thing that the Dalmore 18 and Orange Swift Slander are bringing to this tasting. So bear with me just one second. We're going meta because we're playing a YouTube video inside a YouTube Live. Now, I can't, be held accountable for the space-time continuum, but let's see if it'll work. Okay, guys. Woo, technology. Okay, everyone cross their fingers. I'm really excited about this. Okay. And off we go. Wow. There we go. Okay. Wow. That was absolutely incredible, guys. That was just, oh, Eli, thank you so much. Bringing my volume back up a little. I couldn't do a super technical fade, but I did try to bring it out.
That was beautiful. That was perfect.
Awesome. So I mean, I want to reiterate, I think it's so rare these days, especially in this culture of just constant stimulation. We actually sit back and we listen to something. I mean, that was 4.5 minutes of people, I mean, at the top of their game. Just absolutely, I mean, Renee Fleming at the top of her game. And you know, when you think about, I'm interrupting myself. I have a thing that I discuss a lot when I discuss spirits. There's my camera. That I refer to as whiskey synesthesia. And what I mean by that is that whiskeys has. Sorry, I'm having a really hard time talking tonight. Whiskey has angles, or whiskey has roundness, or whiskey has ovular shapes. I don't know why, but I literally can get this sense of shape in my head. And wine now, the more I drink it, you know, I'm going back from my far away past when I used to speak to it, but to me, Renee Fleming's voice is like a long silver strand. It just sits in the air. I'm just wondering, you know, to offer that idea to you, do either of you ever have a synesthesic effect? Do you see a color? Do you taste something when you're looking at a color? Like, do you have any cross-pollination of how music affects you, or spirits or wine?
I taste visually, and then I have to backtrack and find the words for what I'm seeing. I also get a sensual, like I understand the idea of having a beverage being, you know, having like angles or being smooth and round. Like I get that as well. It's textural. And I think it's something beyond that as well. So I loved Eli's pairing because I saw that in the wine and the scotch. But yes, I do. I experience that as well. But that piece he picked out, like I see that in the wine. It's just, the edges they're soft and in a very beautiful silky way.
Yes, and I think there's a big debate in whiskey where everyone's always like, don't say smooth, because smooth is not a flavor. But, you know, I want to be very clear, when I say smooth, I'm not referring to the aroma or the flavor at all. I'm referring to the fact that I literally see a smooth surface in my head. You know, totally different than what I'm actually tasting or experiencing.
Yeah.
But I mean, Eli, for you, you know, it's a really hard thing. You know, Beth is really pulling her weight with these wine choices, but it's a very hard thing to say, think outside of the box. Don't choose food. Don't choose the obvious. Don't choose a spice or a tea. To think about this a little bit more intellectually, to a place of like the commonality between how that song grows and changes, how that trio laces within each other. I asked Beth this, what were the key markers for you that when you listened to this piece, you were like, this is the one?
I mean, I guess, I don't know if there were markers. It was more just that searching for the feeling of richness and harmony and silky. I mean, it was more it honestly, we thought of the composer first. Like Strauss is known for this kind of thing. Strauss is known for a lot of things. He's known because he sort of straddled the late Romantic era into the early modern era of music. You know, in some of his operas, Salome and Electra really pushed the boundaries as far as tonality and modern components. But Rosenkavalier was such an homage to basically like the classical style of Mozart. He was a huge Mozart fan, and adding in the harmonic richness of Wagner or Franz Liszt. And he was so good at combining those things, and especially in this piece, you see it in that richness, and it's not just richness as far as, like you said, texture or flavor. It's richness in like the Viennese culture of that time. I mean, the whole piece is around richness. So I think that was a big part for me. And yet, I don't experience synesthesia in wine or music. I have friends that have in both worlds, and it's really interesting to see that there's the guy who's the Irie Vineyards down in Oregon. Their winemaker is synesthesia, and actually their labels, a lot of their labels are actually paintings that he does based on his experience tasting their wines, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's it just made sense. And then the intellectual side of talking about aging or talking about these characters in the story, that always was kind of just a bonus, I think, of finding this pairing for these two beverages. So
Well, I'm going to reveal something about you. I mean, right before we hopped onto the live feed, you had mentioned that one of the last performances that you did was in A Little Night Music, which is a Sondheim musical that also deals with young love, old love, missed opportunity, letting go. Very specifically missing your line, missing your cue, missing your entrance. So there seems to be a theme here, Eli, in this understanding of the passage of time and the ways of love. So maybe that's your version of the synesthesia in relation to the spirits tonight.
Totally, yeah. With just combining those worlds, I guess, maybe. But
Right. I would definitely. I mean, I could do a good Send in the Clowns with these two tonight. that wouldn't be too bad. I was also going to kind of lastly say, Beth, I am noticing as I'm drinking both that the quality of standing at the distillery and smelling the aging casks in the air, that dustiness I referred to, it is on the edge of this. So I would almost argue maybe both of these the wine and this, I keep always wanting to say spirits, but wine and spirit are a little bit of a memento mori this evening. They're reminding us of the fresh blossom of young love, but also the faded petal of yesteryear. And I think that beautiful trio definitely hit the nail right on the head, Eli. That was fantastic. Well, guys, we are at the very end of our night, and I'm trying to keep this at an hour. I'm trying really hard. I cannot thank you enough. Eli, thank you for being our special guest. Beth, thank you for being my constant companion throughout these 9 weeks. I am having so much fun with you. I'm a little intimidated to be with two advanced somms, but once we log off of the live feed, please feel free to ask me any risky questions you'd like. And guys, if you look, I'm gonna bungle this because it's to my right, but potentially you're left on the screen. You can follow Beth at Dumb Spiro Sparrow Vino, myself at B Jennifer Wren, and of course, this is Hanua Som. Eli, can you explain that really fast?
Yeah, so I'm late to the social media game, and when I decided to finally start an Instagram handle, I was in Hawaii, and Hanawa is the Hawaiian word for tree, and I love
Hanawa.
So I was like, Hanawa-san, that makes sense.
That makes a lot more sense because I was like, it did look to me as if it was a Hawaiian word, but then I was like, I don't remember Eli telling me he had a connection to Hawaii. So there it is. So Hanawa-san, you can find him. You can, of course, also find the Dalmor at the Dalmor. You can find all of the selections that we have featured from Beth's incredible pairings at, I think it's just Elevage on Instagram, Beth?
Elevage Collection. It's our Instagram handle, but you can also, you could go the Orange Swift website and to find the wines. Also Drizzly, Total Wine, utilize your local wine store. They definitely could use the business as well. And if they don't have it, they can order it for you, most likely.
And also to check out all those gorgeous labels that Orange Swift has created, because there's an archive there of all the many, many incredible labels. And last but not least, also to represent Eli, you are with Avennia.
Avennia.
I don't know why I keep getting that backwards, but Avennia Winery at Avennia Winery.
Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm going to slowly take them off camera, and we're going to say a final goodbye and a final evening. That being said, as I always say, please do enjoy your spirits responsibly. Next week, we are coming back with a super special episode. It's special for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, it's going to be a late night. We're not starting until 7:30, which is not too late on the West Coast, but kind of late for you East Coasters. The second thing is, it is our spooky, spooky Halloween episode. So you're going to hear some very interesting confessions from myself, Beth, and our special guests, who I am not going to reveal yet, but do expect some spooky ghost stories in the spirit of the season. And this is an interesting season because it is actually a season of renewal for some cultures and a season of beginning of the end cycle or the death cycle for other cultures as the harvest is reaped. So guys, however you are spending your fall and your autumn, thank you for spending tonight with us. And I think it's about time to bring up our closing credits. And I'm going to sign off. Have an amazing evening.